The Kansas City Chiefs are in a unique position to do something that has never been done before in NFL history. They just defeated the Buffalo Bills in the AFC Championship, a team that a lot of people thought had the ability to take down the Chiefs, but they moved on and they're going on to the Super Bowl once again, and they have a chance to become the first team in NFL history to win 3 straight Super Bowls. Whether it was the 49ers dynasty or the Patriots dynasty that came after it, no one has achieved this much success consecutively like the Chiefs have. And if they go out here against the Eagles and they win a third straight, whether it's fair or not, there are going to be some uncomfortable conversations that are going to be had about this team. Whether that's about the individuals on it, like a Patrick Mahomes, like a Travis Kelce, or even the head coach Andy Reid, and whether these are conversations that are deservedly so, or whether it's a little bit of projecting, regardless, there are going to be lots of discussions if the Chiefs are able to go out here and win a third straight Super Bowl. Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts, and today we're talking about just that. Could the Chiefs actually threepeat? What are the implications if they do so? And also taking a look at the evolution of this team and how they have been more successful than ever this year with a 15-2 record, whilst also kind of changing their identity a little bit. So to start off here, let's talk about if the Chiefs are actually in a favorable position to go out and threepeat. Because getting to the Super Bowl is one thing, but as we've seen so many times before, there is a reason the game is played. And no matter what you do in the regular season, no matter what you do in the playoffs, up to this point, that's all good and all. And the Chiefs have looked better in the playoffs than they have all season. All it takes is one bad game or one good game to decide a Super Bowl. You take a look at the Detroit Lions, their first playoff game of the year, they go out and they lose after being the best team in the NFC all year. In my opinion, they were the most complete team in all of football. And they lose in the divisional round after having a first round bye. And that is just a case of a way to show you how anything can happen in the NFL. And that is kind of the beauty of football. Because if the game was just decided by, taking a look at each position, you could, go throughout the roster and look at, hey, this team has the better quarterback, but this one has the better running back, and so on and so forth, and compare the offensive and defensive statistics, how many points they've allowed, how many points they've scored. But there is a reason that we play the game, and it comes down a lot of the time to matchups and time of possession. Because football is a game about a lot of things. People will tell you it's a game of turnovers, a game of inches. But what it really comes down to is time of possession. And for the Kansas City Chiefs, to highlight them here first when we're talking about, if they can actually go out here and win the Super Bowl, this is an offense that just had their first 30-point game of the year. And prior to this, they had not scored 30 points once this season, of course. And this was a stark contrast to the way that this team had been set up in years past. This was a team that, especially under the Patrick Mahomes era, was always heavily built around the offense. And particularly that big playability that they had. You look at Mahomes' first season actually playing in the NFL, he threw for 50 touchdowns. And yes, he's never reached that mark of production again because, one, that is an elite number to hit. Only 3 men in NFL history have ever done that. But in Mahomes never hitting that number again, this offense is more cohesive than ever before. Because you don't just rely on the big play Mahomes 70 yards down the field to Travis Kelce, or back when they had Tyreek Hill, you integrate Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco into the game a little bit more. And you become less volatile. You rely less on Patrick having a great game, and he's been really good recently. After kind of a shaky start to the year, you don't rely on him necessarily to win you games anymore, and that's a good thing. I talked about the Heisman Trophy winners, or the Heisman Trophy finalists, and why so often they don't make it that far when it comes to actually, being national champions. It's kind of because you might rely too much on one player, and if the other team has a good game plan for that, that can kind of make the rest of your offense or your defense fall apart along with it. But in not relying on Patrick, especially this year, I think that actually bodes well for the Chiefs because they don't have to rely on the volatility and perhaps inconsistency of a big play, but can just slowly grind you down a little bit more. This is always going to be a pass first team, but they don't have to be one dimensional anymore. And I think that's huge. So that's one way that their identity kind of changed. And then the other way is in the fact that this team is not even necessarily offense first this year. They're kind of a defensive minded team for the way things have gone. Because, like I mentioned earlier, this offense hasn't had the fireworks that it has had in years past. And playing against the Philadelphia Eagles, who obviously have an electric offense, led, of course, by a new addition, 2,000-yard rusher, Saquon Barkley, there's probably going to be a lot of analysts who picture this as a very high scoring game. And because of the talent on both of these offenses, that is absolutely a possibility. But there's also a chance that it could turn into a defensive stalwart. Because the Philadelphia Eagles, in terms of points per game, I believe, they have the number one defense in the entire NFL, led by standout rookie corners Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, as well as stud linebacker, Defensive Player of the Year finalist in Zach Bond, and a finalist for Assistant Coach of the Year in Vic Fangio. But the Chiefs have a great defense as well. Spagnolia has been a great defensive coordinator for them. And I believe it was Chris Jones who just came out and said this, that as long as they have Spags, they're going to keep winning. Because that's just the caliber of defensive coordinator that he is. You see it over in Detroit. I think Dan Campbell's a great head coach, but it certainly doesn't hurt to have great coordinators as well. You look at a guy like Ben Johnson. He played a critical part in making the offense run as well as it did. Coordinators are a huge thing, and the Chiefs have that locked down, especially on the defensive end. And as a result of that, we see that success on the field with his defense as well. Of course, you have Chris Jones, who really has seemingly never declined despite getting up there in age. And then on the other end of that, you have the guy who benefits from playing alongside Chris Jones and George Karlaftis, who is a very good player in himself, but that is exemplified when you're playing alongside someone who's going to draw a lot of defensive attention in number 95, Chris Jones. When that happens and teams are always looking to stop Jones first, that opens up opportunities for Karlaftis. And great players come out when they can capitalize on those opportunities, and that's exactly what he has done. Then another standout for this team on defense is Trent McDuffie. This team just lost L'Jarius Sneed going into this year, and I was of the opinion that was definitely going to hurt their secondary. I thought that the combination of Sneed and McDuffie was amazing, and we saw at times last year how they could lock down opposing wide receivers, and there was no doubt about that. But much like their Karlaftis and Chris Jones situation, I thought that they both mutually benefited from playing alongside one another. And so when L'Jarius Sneed went off to the Titans, I thought that McDuffie might be able to get exploited just a little bit more. But he has still been really good for this team. And this team has really taken on a defensive identity. But what does that mean for them? Because I've talked about the implications in terms of their play on the field. But what does it mean in terms of results? And on that end, I kind of want to draw comparisons to the Patriots dynasty under the greatest of all time in Tom Brady. And keep that in mind, because we're going to be back to that point later about the GOAT, because that's certainly a conversation to be had that people will be having, whether rightfully or not, after the Super Bowl if the Chiefs go on and they threepeat. So with this shift to a little bit more of a defensive focused identity and allowing your offense to be a little slower, not super volatile with relying on a big play as much. So that allows you to have more time of possession, allows your defense to be rested for their next possession. And like we said, football is a game of time of possession above all else. You look at the Patriots dynasty, obviously the first thing that's going to stick out to you is the greatness and the caliber of Tom Brady. And rightfully so, he is the greatest football player of all time. But there was a lot more that went into this team than just Tom Brady and the guys that were catching his passes, whether it was Randy Moss or Wes Welker or Rob Gronkowski. Bill Belichick especially is a defensive guru. And this team consistently had great defenses. And that was truly the key to unlocking this team's success. Because what it does is, and we see this with the Chiefs now as well, where they didn't have a great offense all year, but they went 15-2 in the regular season, and now they're in the Super Bowl. But what would happen with the Patriots is, even if Tom Brady didn't throw for, 50 passing touchdowns in a year, or he had a bad game or two, because of how great that Patriots defense was, they were still in contention year after year. And even in the years where, like 2008, where Tom Brady was dealing with injury, or 2016 when he had Deflategate, they were always near the top of the league because that defense was still able to keep them in pretty much any game. And I think it's the same way with this Chiefs team this year. So this is a team, when we ask the question that we're finally answering now after 10 minutes of talking about it, do they have a chance to three-peat? I think they absolutely do. And that is in spite of this team's offensive struggles all year. This offense has looked better than ever in the postseason. That defense is stellar, and it's kept them in games all year, kept them winning games all year. And we look at the success that teams like the Patriots dynasty had. There's good reason to think that is a sustainable strategy to kind of rely on the defense, and they can absolutely three-peat. I don't think it's a bad strategy whatsoever. But there's one other side of the coin, and that is, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles. Because, in my opinion, if the Eagles are ever going to win a Super Bowl under Jalen Hurts in this window that they have right now, this is the year for them. Because, for one, Saquon Barkley, he's going to be great for years to come. He is on a Hall of Fame trajectory, but he's not going to run for 2,000 yards again. No running back has ever done that twice. For Jalen Hurts, this has been an uber safe year for him. They had that collapse last year, which was due in large part to his turnovers towards the back half of the season. He's turned that around, only thrown 5 picks all year, none in the playoffs. In this past game, he looked as sharp as he ever has. This whole year, he has been stable, but not necessarily efficient at moving the ball down the field. He'll keep it. He'll be conservative. He won't make too many risky throws. But sometimes that can be a little bit of a detriment to your team because you're not forcing the ball downfield. But he had a mix of both last game, and it was really good to see. So Hurts is playing as well as he ever has, being as safe as he ever has. And that fumble that he had a couple years ago when these two teams met in the Super Bowl, that was crucial to the Chiefs winning at the end of the day. And then that defense, obviously, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are only going to get better. These are two stud rookie corners. But what really stands out to me is Zach Bond. I talked about him a second ago in a positive light, but if we're talking about this being Philly's best chance to win a Super Bowl, it's because Howie Roseman, the GM for the Eagles, he doesn't like playing his linebackers. And he is absolutely willing to let them walk, no matter how great they might have played, in favor of maybe a little bit worse of an option, but a cheaper option. So you might not have Zach Bond if you're the Eagles next year. And if you're going to win Super Bowl, I think you want to capitalize on everything connecting at just the right level. They started out the year 2-2. They've lost one game since. So for the Chiefs, they're going to be facing some pretty tough competition. The Philadelphia Eagles are hitting on all cylinders. They had 55 points against Washington, but they are still in a very good position to win, just as a result of kind of the history we've seen towards defensive-minded, time of possession teams, as opposed to relying too much on big chunk plays. And you kind of saw that with their AFC Championship opponent, too, the Buffalo Bills. This was Josh Allen's perhaps best year yet in terms of his safety with the ball, as someone who was always known for being a little bit turnover prone. And it was because with the loss of a guy like Stephon Diggs, they weren't as enamored with the huge chunk plays that they would be in the past. But instead, James Cook had a 1,000-yard year, and they let Josh Allen play a little bit more within the flow of the offense, and they had a very good chance to beat the Chiefs. And it was a very successful season for them, even though it didn't end how they had hoped. So I think even this year we saw an example of a team that's done something like the Chiefs have had, where they're not worried about the big chunk plays necessarily, but more fundamental football. And it's definitely a successful strategy. So we've established that the Chiefs have a good chance to win. But if the Eagles are going to win, it's really a coin toss, and it's been great years from both teams. But if the Chiefs do go out here and they win the Super Bowl, their third straight and the fourth under the Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce era, what are these conversations that we're going to be having for them? Because ever since Patrick Mahomes came into the scene back in 2018, throwing for 50 touchdowns in his first year being the full-time starter, the media has been a big fan of the Kansas City Chiefs, and there's no sugarcoating that. And it's a business, right? At the end of the day, if they're profiting from talking about the Chiefs, they're going to talk about the Chiefs. And it's funny looking back because in that 2018 AFC Championship that they went to, they were facing the Tom Brady led Patriots. And at that time, everyone, it seemed like, was rooting for the Chiefs to knock down this Patriots dynasty, this young, upstart Chiefs team. And now the tables have turned completely. No one wants to see the Chiefs win outside of people in Kansas and Missouri. Or at the very least, that's the vocal majority. And the rest of the Chiefs fans they're watching for sure. We see it in the revenue. But the vocal majority of people don't want to see the Chiefs win. And to an extent, they don't want to see Philly win either. So it's kind of a toss-up. They might just want to see both teams lose. But going back to the media, of course, they certainly do talk about the Chiefs quite a bit. And Patrick Mahomes, particularly, has been put into conversations with Tom Brady. And that's been going on for a couple years now. They were doing that when Mahomes had 2 rings. For context on how much that they have hyped him up in the past, using the cycle of sports video games as a timeline, we are on Madden NFL 25 right now. And back in Madden 22, when the Chiefs had won, I believe, just one Super Bowl to that point. Yeah, just one Super Bowl under Patrick Mahomes. They marketed that game, and they had Brady and Mahomes on the cover, and they were calling it GOAT and Baby GOAT. They've been throwing Patrick Mahomes in GOAT conversations ever since he had one Super Bowl. And if he wins 3 straight, something Tom Brady never was able to do because it's very difficult, and gets his 4th, it's still 3 rings away from Tom Brady. But there's going to be even more GOAT conversations for Patrick Mahomes. And some people don't like that, right? And that's absolutely fair. I think especially given the length of his career, so much could still happen because you can always project. And the way that the Chiefs have been so great for so long, people are always going to project that the Chiefs are going to be contenders and Super Bowl winners for years to come. But this is a league that is seemingly more talented than ever. Everyone wants to take down the Chiefs. There's no guarantee that they get 4 more rings to even tie Tom Brady, right? So then we get into the reason why they're kind of calling him the greatest of all time, why they're putting him in conversations when he's still such a young player with so much time to go. And that is kind of because his brand of football is perfect for the culture of today. You look at Tom Brady, this is a guy who was not particularly athletic, but he was a dang good passer, and he could fit the ball just about anywhere. But when you're talking about the most talented quarterbacks of all time, guys that might come to mind are more so in the vein of an Aaron Rodgers or a Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes. And with the rise of social media and it being more prominent than ever, something that has affected sports within it is highlight culture. And especially, with something like TikTok or Instagram Reels, it's going to be a short form video. And so often that's just going to be one highlight play, one huge throw, or one big improvisation, get out of the pocket and make a throw downfield. And Patrick Mahomes is the perfect fit for that because of the arm talent that he has and his ability to improvise. He is this generation's Brady, not in terms of play style, but in terms of impact. And people are going to have voices now through social media more than ever. And as a result of that, there's going to be these calls for Mahomes to be the GOAT when they see some big 75-yard play, even though he's still got so far to go. But he's uber talented, and he absolutely has a case, but not right now. I think in time, there will absolutely be more proper conversations about Patrick Mahomes potentially being the greatest of all time. And those will certainly be out there if the Chiefs go out here and they threepeat. But I do think at the end of the day, it is slightly premature. But absolutely an all-time great quarterback already. And if they go here and they threepeat, they're absolutely going to be putting him in even more GOAT conversations, fair or not. Then we move on to Travis Kelce. This is someone who had a little bit of a down year. In fact, my most viewed segment ever here on State of the Association with 2.6 thousand people tuning in was one about Travis Kelce talking about his slow start. And man, going back and looking at that, it's a segment I do not enjoy it. It was at a time where I might stay on a topic for a good 4 minutes and move on. When really I kind of enjoyed the art more so in the storytelling aspect, diving deep into the context of everything like I'm doing here. And it was very reactionary. I didn't have much of a take whatsoever. I said, I think he'll get better. I don't think we should overreact, but he is having a slow start to the season. It was very observatory, very just kind of news like. And I don't like strictly just reporting. I love the storytelling aspects of journalism. Brian Windhorst, a big sports media executive here, has kind of talked about, especially in line with the NBA, that storytelling has kind of become a lost art in journalism. I'm trying to bring that back. That's the whole point of State of the Association here. But with Travis Kelce in particular, I had to give a shout out to my most viewed segment ever, if I didn't love it. But with Kelce, he is in line for not just like Mahomes is with the quarterback and Tom Brady. He is in line for not just greatest tight end of all time conversations, but particularly all time great playoff performers. Because he did have a down season compared to some of his standards. But come playoff time, Travis Kelce has been elite for the Kansas City Chiefs year in, year out. And especially with having no number one wide receiver due to the injury to Rashee Rice, that's been even more on display this year come playoff time. And people remember the winners, and Travis Kelce, by that standard, has been one of the best tight ends of all time. Because where do you win on the biggest stage? That's in the postseason as well as the Super Bowl. And you look at a guy like Julian Edelman, who didn't have a stellar regular season career. He was always a solid wide receiver for the Patriots. And notice how I keep drawing comparisons to the Patriots dynasty because the Chiefs are, of course, the most recent NFL dynasty. You look at Julian Edelman, he didn't have a stellar regular season career, but come playoff time, he was a different animal. He was special in the playoffs, and people were calling for him to be a Hall of Famer as a result of that. Ultimately, it hasn't happened yet, especially not, a first ballot kind of Hall of Famer. But he's in those conversations because of his playoff ability. And Travis Kelce has obviously had the regular season to back it up as well. But when people remember Kelce, they're going to remember his playoff performances. If he has, a great showing in the Super Bowl and they go out there and they three-peat, people are going to remember Travis Kelce all the more. So showing out on the biggest stage year in, year out in the postseason, that's great for Travis Kelce. And once again, kind of with a highlight culture of people just seeing the big plays from Kelce come the postseason time. Yeah, there's going to be conversations about Kelce too. He is an all-time player performer and an all-time tight end. Then someone who, we're maybe not having greatest of all time debates about, and that is Trent McDuffie. I talked about him earlier as well, talking about the Chiefs' identity. But with Trent McDuffie, this is a quarterback who, in my opinion, is really, really good. But being on the Chiefs team that has so many stars from Chris Jones to Mahomes to Kelce, he doesn't always get the recognition that he deserves for his contributions to this team. But especially in the absence of L'Jarius Sneed, in him being without a doubt the go-to guy in the secondary for this team. He's had a very good year, and the Chiefs defense would not be the same without him. And if he goes out here and he has a good showing in the Super Bowl, my lockdown in AJ Brown or Devontae Smith, which, those two guys are elite wide receivers. If he goes out there and makes one of them have a little bit of a quiet game over there on McDuffie Island, he's going to get a lot more recognition. And, I'm not a big advocate for the Mahomes or Kelce GOAT debate, but if we're talking about Trent McDuffie in conversations of one of the better corners in the league and finally giving him recognition for that, I would be all in favor of that. He is a great corner, and if the Chiefs go out here and they three-peat with him winning that secondary, that's going to be huge, and more people are going to recognize just how good Trent McDuffie is. And then my last one here is not about a player, but it is about Andy Reid and the, the genius that he is. Once again, like we were talking about with Trent McDuffie, a lot of time we're talking about the Chiefs, it's going to go to Mahomes, it's going to go to Chris Jones, it's going to go to Travis Kelce. But one guy who does get recognized, and rightfully so, is Andy Reid. And coaching, for the most part, is kind of a thankless job. You look at their opponent in the Super Bowl here in Philadelphia Eagles, Nick Sirianni, despite all the success that he has had, and I think he is good for the Philadelphia culture at the end of the day. This is a guy who tries very hard for his players, is very vocal. I think he fits in Philadelphia pretty well. But when the Eagles start out the year 2-2, and when they had that collapse at the end of last year, despite the success that Nick Sirianni has had, I don't think he's ever missed the playoffs with them. And he has utilized Jalen Hurts from a guy who threw for 16 touchdowns in his first year starting to truly being an MVP caliber quarterback. No matter how much his coordinators do for him, and no matter the talent of this roster, at the end of the day, you still have to maximize that talent. And Nick Sirianni, at the very least, has not undermined it. But so many people were calling for his head with that collapse last year and the start this year. That looked like a little bit of a continuation of that. But it's just kind of a showing of, in spite of your success, head coach can be a very thankless job, especially at the highest level. And you've got to be really, really successful to go out there and get a lot of recognition as a head coach. And Andy Reid is in that conversation of head coaches who get their flowers, and rightfully so. This guy is a mastermind. I was gonna have a video, a segment about an episode, whatever you might call it, about the Chiefs and specifically about Andy Reid and just kind of the level of coach that he is, because I think he absolutely has maximized the development of Patrick Mahomes, having him sit behind Alex Smith for a year and consistently having, a great defensive coordinator in Spagnuolo to play alongside and coach alongside and have a great defensive unit, as well as in most years having a very, very good offense as well. I think Andy Reid is a genius when it comes to head coaches. And if he wins his fourth Super Bowl here, I think he deserves a lot of flowers as truly the head of this dynasty. Most of the attention is going to go to the quarterback, the guy who is delivering, facilitating this offense. But Andy Reid deserves all the recognition that he can get as well. This is an all-time great head coach, and just seeing him get all the flowers, once again, I'm not necessarily in the boat of Patrick Mahomes as a GOAT, and I'm a little bit more accepting of Travis Kelce for everything he's done in the playoffs, but, I'm not necessarily fully on board with those. But when it comes to Trent McDuffie getting more recognition, and especially Andy Reid getting his flowers as a head coach, when so many coaches don't, I would love to see that. And these are for the conversations that we're going to be having if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl here and they threepeat and they get their fourth under the Andy Reid era. So there you go. That is the implications of the Chiefs, what we could be talking about if they threepeat. How fair is it? As well as, do they really have a chance to do so? And the fact that this changing of identity, as history tells us with a team like the Patriots, is only a good thing for the Chiefs. Having to constantly evolve to, better your competition, outlast them, and be the best version of yourself that you can be. Even when you're having bad games on offense, that defense is able to keep you in it and keep you winning most games. This team is very, very talented, very complete. They absolutely have a chance to threepeat. There's going to be some uncomfortable conversations that we might be having if they do. But that's kind of the beauty of the sport. I love the nuance of it. I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but that's what this whole state of the association thing is about. I'm involved in the discourse about this, trying to spin things positively a little bit. When so often in sports media, it's always so negative. And if you made it all the way through, maybe honestly, if you made it all the way through, you're already subscribed to this, right? I don't know that anyone's gonna find this on their recommended. They're gonna sit all the way through almost 30 minutes of talking about the Kansas City Chiefs from someone that they have no clue who this guy is, right? But if you made it all the way through, I think in my recent stuff that I've been putting out, I've been somewhat monotone, and that's because there was a time here where my first microphone that I bought, it had a lot of bass and it had a lot of distortion. So if I would get too loud, too passionate talking about the sports that I love and football and basketball and what I enjoy doing, if I would get too loud talking about that, man, it would come out really bad. but I paid for this $50 microphone. It's got a little bit of pop to it. We're gonna need to get a little foam cover for it. But I hope this one in particular came out a little bit better. Was a lot less monotone. That actually got brought up to me in class today. So I'm a junior in high school. By the time I went to college, this isn't going to be a full time thing. I have my doubts that it could ever truly be, but certainly experience in the journalism field. So and by the time I went to college, that'll be 6 years of talking about sports. And in math class today, I had a friend come up to me and say, "Hey, this is good, but it would take it to the next level if you sounded a little bit more confident and like you weren't so bored, right?" And in my mind, with this, I kind of overcorrected because of the microphone that I had, as well as the fact that I think I might have sounded more composed, when I'm taking it a little bit slower, when I'm not showing as much passion. But that's what sports are all about. It's about the passion to it. I'm a Philadelphia fan, right? they call Eagles fans crazy, and there's certainly a section of them that are. But this is a city, and I say that it's a city. I'm from Oklahoma, but it's the city that surrounds it is one that's very passionate about sports, and that's a great example of what sports are all about. It's entertainment, right? And so, as a result of that, why not let loose? Why not let your emotions show and put your best into something? Have a better vocal performance talking about the games and sports that you love. And that's what I tried to do here today. I hope it turned out well. If you made it all the way through. And, just having maybe a bit more vocal of a voice here, that's only going to kind of further the brand and the identity that we want, right? Because being a little bit more monotone, so often that comes with a bit of a negative connotation. Right? You might turn on ESPN or something, and they're criticizing a player, and they're either going to be laying into him real passionately, real aggressively, or they're going to be talking just kind of in a monotone voice about this player's averaging so and so on 15% shooting. What happened to this guy's shooting? Why can't he score anymore? But I want to promote more positive topics with this. This was and kind of just break the norms of sports media. Whether it's all the negativity, that's my main thing, right? But also just kind of sparking conversations that so often aren't going to be had. Like talking about not just the conversations that people are going to be having if the Chiefs Threepeat, but all the context behind that, not just asking, hey, what happens if Mahomes three-peats here, but asking, hey, why are people going to think that? I just want to promote, different storytelling aspects of it, bring storytelling back to sports journalism, promote more free thinking, more conscious thinking, more logical thinking. And, if I got to be a little bit less monotone to set the tone for that, set the mood, set the vibe for what you're going to be talking about, and breaking the standards of sports media, I'm all for that. And I think that would kind of represent the brand. So we're going to get more involved on that. And one issue that came with it for me was when I would lay in more, talk more passionately, so often I would speed up my words and not necessarily everything would come out clearly. And I think there were definitely times in this where that happened. So there was kind of, in my mind, a little bit of a trade off between talking too fast or slowing down a little bit, but not necessarily having, the vocal performance to carry that. And so as a result, maybe the listening retention time and stuff on this was not necessarily the highest because I might be slowing my words down a little bit, but I'm not energized to keep people tuned and informed and entertained most of all. But that's something that just gets better with time. Comfortability comes with time, as well as just getting experience like this. I think was much better than, like I talked about earlier, that Travis Kelce said me. That's still my highest viewed thing here over on YouTube. 2.6 thousand listeners. I love that, right? But it's something that is far from my best works. And I've only gotten better at actually talking about sports, breaking down the nuances of it, the context behind it, like I love doing. But then you come down to that comfortability aspect of it, and that's only going to get better with time. And you don't have to worry about doing everything perfect because if you do, you're never going to get anywhere because you're going to keep getting frustrated when things don't go perfectly your way. Right? So it's just about improvement. And so in being less monotone, maybe we're going to talk faster at some points. And you just got to be able to, manage and slow down a little bit whilst maintaining a more energized level here. Because at the end of the day, this is a podcast in the sense of it's audio centric. The footage, there isn't a lot necessarily going on. There's no big editing tricks if you're here watching on YouTube. And it's also, over on Spotify where it is truly audio only. So I've got to have the vocal forms to, keep people tuned in. And that comes with being more energized. And I can't worry about, you know, um, not being as concise because that just comes with it. And that comes naturally just getting better with time. So shout out to the man in my math class talking about that. I hope this is less monotone. And when we're talking about less monotone, in terms of that, I think this was my best one in terms of flow as well, because so often it was kind of a trade off for me. I don't think it was as much this time. So love to see that. We're just getting better. That's all for today's episode of State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Thank you for listening if you made it this far. I went off on a little bit of a tangent there at the end, but that's something that I think is really, really important and definitely someone I want to talk about if you're someone who is subscribed, if you're following on Spotify, whatever it might be, and you're kind of invested in the improvement of this because really at this point, especially early on when I wasn't even covering stuff the best, and even now, it's far from the best, but it's certainly better when I was just really going into reporting, not going into stuff that much. People kind of would subscribe or follow as a little bit of an investment, right, in the future of this, saying it has a little bit of potential and I hope it gets better with time, as opposed to the quality of it being that great right now. But I think this was a big step in the right direction, maybe my favorite thing I've ever done today. So shout out to I'll name drop, right? He watches this, he appreciates it. He of course talked to me about it. Shout out to Keegan Murphy. Thank you for the kind of realization here. I hope this one came out a lot better. And for anyone watching that's made it this far, I would imagine they're all subscribed or following the podcast at this point, and they were, invested in the tangent and the improvement of this. But if they weren't, and you've made it this far, I hope everything, with the brand of State of the Association, kind of trying to define it as, promoting positivity, promoting free conscious thinking, really going in depth on things. I hope that this came across well, and I hope it was a pretty good first impression if you're coming here for the first time today. But regardless, thank you if you made it all the way through. Almost 40 minutes on one thing. That's something that would have been inconceivable to me not long ago. Thank you. This has been State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts.